The universe swirls in its inexplicable vastness, which we view from this perfect, peerless perch, this spinning blue BB, this planet we call Earth. And as eons passed and cycled, there has never been a better viewing spot on this entire planet than the great brow of these red bluffs overlooking this beloved bay.
The town is perfectly placed, a jewel of the Sun Belt. Prosperity sings in the ringing registers of the fashionable shops, bustling, fairly bursting their once staid surroundings. And there's more here than meets the eye.
Listen, there is more here than meets the eye.
The botanists have worked their magic, and glorious red blooms cascade from baskets dangling from lampposts. Carefully chosen winter hardies innocently peek at passers-by from manicured beds at every corner. And more is here than meets the eye.
Everything is done in perfect taste. The old buildings are gussied up better than new. The afternoon sun of December 31st gleams on the new paint. Christmas decorations rattle ominously. And there is more here than meets the eye.
We are the wind spiriting through the happy town.
Blowing down Gaston.
Racing a baseball-capped bicycle boy along Powell.
Rattling a pine cone across Spell.
We are the wind, and we know there is more here than meets the eye.
Come, let's rattle the bow. Let's blow the leaf pile.
Let's wake the dead.
Let's rattle the winter scene painted panes on the storefronts of the movie house mall. Chase invisible vapors of popery and prosperity.
Of JD's chicken with tarragon sauce.
Espresso. Cappuccino.
If you buy two, you get a free candle.
Oh, a scented, of course.
Of course.
Espresso. Cappuccino. Woo!
Bed and breakfast, anyone?
The day is losing its grip. The afternoon warmth where Fairhope cats snugly stretched disappears in stretching shadows with no cold comfort to offer.
Happy shoppers Lexus home, down Nichols, down Morphe, Mershon.
And more is here.
Artisans and shop girls check out and find their way home up Johnson and Stimson and George.
And meets the eye.
The tall pines in the graveyard by the big head reach past the bones of the founders.
Belangi and Coleman and Woods.
Reach skyward as tall pines do, clinging to the sunlight, clinging desperately for a shining moment to the fleeting sunlight.
Which slips with the speed of absolute patience, slips to the top of the Noel Park pines, almost caught, then gone.
Changing the light on Johnson and Howland and Horn.
The wind scurries westward, chasing the sunlight to the Buttercookie Beach.
A winter sunset hangs majestically in the cooling sky as a molten ball plunges toward distant dolphin.
The wick, once more, turns down a notch, and the wind picks up its cue, pouring on the coal.
Fiberplastic sailboats bounce panicking on the not-so-snug harbor. Those riding cocky in the sunlight exchange uneasy glances and seek the seawall, their illusion of safety from the sea.
Daytime fishermen feel the chill as the breeze stiffens. One good dose, and they pack their prickly gear like scaly carpetbaggers and scurry for the safety of the beach.
Once the orange disk is down, the high clouds imitate the tall trees in the graveyard and in the park. They hang at heavenly heights, clinging to the sun, till the whitest puff pinkens, sky blue pink, then crimson, then gray, as the stratosphere's coal draws out their life, like an icy spider, sucking pink life from its floating victims. Gray carcasses hanging like silver trophies in the silver sky.
The out-of-place tinfoil Christmas trees perched uneasily on the pier danced to colored lights, underlining the pier's importance to the town. Brave souls walked clinch-jawed into the chilling wind, then turned, half running, forced shoreward by the darkening cold, past the massive fountain proclaiming abundance in its most elemental sense.
A theme oft repeated throughout the town.
Not noticing the abundant roses planted to justify the town song.
A shaggy mutt dashes diagonal up the steep hill, chased by the darkening winds, howling for home, blazing through neighborhoods still ablaze with Christmas lights rattling in the wind, down Morphy and Kiefer and White.
There's more here than meets the eye.
Kids prepare with 7-Up and cracker balls, while grown-ups struggle with the formal duds.
To welcome the new year, a turning of the page, anesthetized by revelry.
There'll be a hot time in the old town tonight.
In the cold town tonight.
The north wind whips down streets named for reformers, chill streets whose names burn hot with reform.
Listen, there's more here than meets the eye.
Reform for a system run wild with wealth and crushingly cruel under the boot heel of poverty. One glorious hand raising the mighty and well-positioned, the other without mercy, crushing the immigrant, the unemployed, the poor.
The whirlwind of the Industrial Revolution roared unfettered through the 1800s, growing powerful enough to sweep under such giants as Thomas Jefferson, its power drawn from the easiest taft of strong emotion, human greed.
Jefferson and his supporters had seen the terrors of the European industrial system, which had elevated the high and noble-born and forced the lower classes into virtual slavery. They wanted to keep America a nation of land-holding farmers and merchants who could lead healthy, if not wealthy lives, independent of fluctuating economies.
They were opposed by the Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, and many high-positioned elitists. They favored the sale of government lands in no smaller than 10,000-acre plots, so as to make them unavailable to anyone but the rich and powerful. To them, the new industrial system would maintain what they called the natural order of things. In 1783, Hamilton explained his position.
It is true that 4/7 of the workers in British mills are women and children, but in this way they are rendered more useful than they would otherwise be. The factory system in our country would give greater power to the rich and well-born, and it is they who should run the country. And manufacture would encourage immigration and help populate the nation.
So ran the arguments. But arguments be damned. The hurricane winds of manufacture could not be slowed. And by the eve of the Civil War, 140,000 factories worth over $1 billion employed over 1.3 million workers. By 1869, all those numbers doubled, and it changed everything.
It created wealth undreamed of. By 1890, American millionaires numbered in the thousands. Many rose by hard work, initiative, and intelligence. Many by the use of family position, political corruption, or the manipulation of the unregulated capitalistic system.
However they got there, they lived high and spent their wealth conspicuously. Empires of rail or steel or oil or banking intertwined with corrupt politicians became the playthings of ruthless capitalists. Vanderbilt, Carnegie, Baruch, Rockefeller, and their peers became known as the robber barons, the top dogs of a dog-eat-dog world. Their wealth was counted in the billions, and well over half of the wealth of the land of the free was held by 1% of its population, and it was they who dug the end of the century the Gilded Age.
This powerful class set up a society copied after European aristocracy, with themselves, of course, as the nobility. They saw themselves as the rightful heirs to the rulers of Europe, or emperors of Rome.
They built palaces for themselves to show their lofty positions to anyone who cared to look.
This marble home on Fifth Avenue cost New York City merchant A.T. Stewart a mere $2 million in 1869. Of course, it took twice that to furnish it decently. A bit more lavish is this 3/4-acre country home of California banker James T. Flood. The architects defined it as a modification of the Louis Coutures.
Let us not overlook the Vanderbilts. This chateau on Fifth Avenue was built for William K. Vanderbilt by the architect R.M. Hunt. His flair with chateau made him a favorite with the Gilded Age. This is the home of William K. Vanderbilt's aunt, Mrs. Cornelius Vanderbilt. There were no less than 4 Vanderbilt mansions within a few blocks of each other, all on Fifth Avenue, of course.
Of course. This cottage, the breakers at Newport, set Cornelius Vanderbilt back over $5 million before he even bought a stick of furniture. Bravely placed over the library or fireplace was the motto, "Little do I care for riches." Indeed.
Indeed. But pressure was beginning to build. The possession of so much wealth in so few hands created a bottleneck in the capitalistic flow and choked off most of the population. The radical politician Huey Long was later to describe the situation.
The Lord has answered the prayer. He has called the barbecue. Come, he has said to 125 million American people, come enjoy my bounty. But Morgan and Mellon and Rockefeller and Baruch have walked up to that table and took 85% of the victuals off the table. Now how you gonna feed the balance of the American people? And what are Morgan and Mellon and Rockefeller and Baruch gonna do with all that grub? They can't eat it. They can't wear the clothes. They can't live in the houses. Give them a yacht. Give them a palace. Send them to Reno every year. Give them a new wife if that's what they want. Once they've had all on God's living earth that they can live in and they can wear and they can eat and their children can wear and live in and eat and their children's children can use, then we gotta say to Mr. Morgan and Mr. Mellon and Mr. Rockefeller and Mr. Baruch, hey now, fellas, come on back here. Come on back here to this table. You got to put something back up here that you took away from here that you can't use. You got to leave something else for the American people. They created it, and by God, they get to enjoy some of it. Well, that's my program in a nutshell.
So, what was left for the rest of us? To be sure, a new middle class was evolving. Mostly small town or rural, mostly white native born, mostly educated and skilled. But by this time, most of America lived in the cities, and of these, over half were poor, foreign born, and untrained. The ignorant hands that labored at the machines and factories of the very rich. And because of their fear, their ignorance, and their lack of ability to escape, they could be made to work for almost nothing.
The cities became crime-ridden jungles with millions of helpless poor crammed into disgusting tenements. Sidney Lenz describes the situation in his book, Poverty Then and Now.
The most debilitating feature of his life was the slums he lived in. As people oversaturated the cities, multi-story tenements rose, overcrowded, lacking proper ventilation and sunlight, shoddily constructed and ridden with crime and disease. When the buildings were crammed full, people inhabited the cellars. The New York City police chief noted that 1 out of every 23 people lived in a cellar, with the average per room being 6. In one cellar alone, there were 20 people per room. The average lifespan of an Irishman after moving into the slums was 14 years.
There are 99 who live and die in want and hunger cold, that one may live in a palace and be wrapped in silken fold. The 99 in hovels bare, the one in a palace with riches rare.
And what of the children? As always, the very young and the very old pay the highest price for poverty. Ms. Jane Addams, mother of American social work, wrote in her book 20 Years at Hull House,
The first 3 crippled children we encountered in the neighborhood had all been injured while their mothers were at work. One cheerful little toddler was called Goosey because of all the goose feathers in his hair and clothing, which his mother trailed home from the mattress factory where she worked. One March morning, Goosey's mother was hanging out the laundry on the roof before going to work. 5-year-old Goosey was following along behind, handing her clothespins, when a sudden gust of wind blew him into the alley below. His neck was snapped. As he lay limp and piteous, his mother cheerily called out to him,
"Come on up, Goosey. Climb back up again. You can do it."
So confident do overworked mothers become that their children cannot be hurt. In a futile effort to be of help, I asked her if there was anything we could do. The poor, sorrow-stricken woman looked up and replied,
If you could give me my wages for tomorrow, I wouldn't go into the factory at all. I'd like to stay home all day and just hold the baby. Goosey was always asking me to hold him, and I never had any time.
Of her experience with the aged poor, Jane Addams wrote,
I remember the dying hour of one old Scotch woman whose long struggle to remain respectable had so embittered her that her last words were taunts to those who were trying to minister to her.
So you came in yourself this morning, did you? You only sent things yesterday. I guess you knew the doctor was coming. Don't try to warm my feet with anything but that old jacket I've got there. It belonged to my son who drowned at Sinai 30 years ago. It's warmer yet, with human feelings, than any of your damn charity hot water bottles.
Suddenly, the harsh, gasping voice was stilled in death, and I awaited the doctor's coming, shaken and horrified.
With gates of silver and bars of gold, he have fenced my sheep from their father's fold. I have heard the dropping of their tears in heaven these 1800 years. O Lord and Master, ours not the guilt. We built but as our fathers built. Behold thine images, how they stand sovereign and sole throughout the land. Then Christ sought out an artist, a low-browed, stunted, haggard man, and a motherless girl whose fingers thin pushed faintly from her wanton sin. These he set in the midst of them, and as they drew back their garment hem for fear of defilement, lo, here, said he, the images ye have made of me. James Russell Lowell.
Reform. The hot winds of reform blew out of the fires of injustice. When this injustice victimized the poor immigrant residents of the big city slums, they were powerless to fight it. But when their piteous plight came to the attention of the ethically educated middle class, a powerful new ally emerged. All over the country, hundreds of groups met to study and to implement reform. They were morally tormented by the question, how can so much wealth produce such devastating poverty? They seriously studied this cruel paradox and remained faithfully abreast of all new developments and possible solutions.
Such a group was the Des Moines Investigating Club, founded in Iowa by the young editor of the populist newspaper, the Farmers Tribune, Ernest B. Gaston, his father-in-law C.L. Mershon, former teacher James Belangi, and their associates were committed to the burning need to improve the lot of the lowest of society in order to rescue the whole of society from the class warfare that the present system was charging toward.
The hot winds of reform cycloned around Belangi and Gaston, Mershon.
Like thousands of their peers, they were appalled by the level of political corruption and the complete lack of scruples on the part of powerful political leaders who control the system. They saw a very real need for the government to protect the many from the powerful few. The Des Moines group became very active in the populist movement.
Here, they were joined by a new, powerful, and highly motivated ally, the American farmer. Mostly white and native-born, they had been lured to the West and the South by the promise of low freight rates and cheap money.
We borrowed paper, greenbacks, issued during the Civil War, to buy land which had been given to the railroads and land jobbers by easily bribed politicians. When President Grant called in the devalued greenbacks, we were helpless. We had to pay back in gold what we had borrowed as paper. And Grant's friends, the Eastern bankers and railroad men, grew even richer at the expense of us hard-working farmers. Farming the farmer became a major source of wealth in many farm areas. Interest rates became as high as 50%. And the railroads raised freight rates to 3/4 the market value of our crops. Well, we had to fight back. So we organized into giant groups called Granges at first, and then the Farmers Alliance. And by 1892, our alliances counted over 2 million members. That's 2 out of every 3 farmers in America.
The farmers were the backbone of the reform movement, which was fleshed out by such diverse groups as the suffragettes, the Knights of Labor, the populists, the prohibitionists, the single taxers, and the morally outraged middle class.
It all came to a head on the 4th of July of 1892. The bustling farm town of Omaha, Nebraska played host to the convention for the formation of the Populist Party. Thousands of enthusiastic reformers, referred to in the press as hayseed socialists, crowded into the fairgrounds and waited anxiously for the platform preamble to be read by Ignatius Donald.
We meet in the midst of a world brought to the verge of moral, political, and material ruin. Corruption dominates the ballot boxes, the legislature, the Congress, and touches even the ermine on the bench. The fruits of toils of millions is bodily stolen to build up the colossal fortunes of a few. The possessors of these, in turn, despise the republic and threaten liberty. From the same prolific womb of governmental injustice, we give birth to the 2 great classes, tramps and millionaires.
The place went wild. an eyewitness said. There was an act of the mightiest scene ever witnessed by the human race. 15,000 people yelled, shrieked through papers, hats, fans, and parasols, gathered up banners and mounted shoulders. The wild ovation went on for over 40 minutes.
Goodbye, my party, goodbye. To hear all else I never would go. Goodbye, my party, goodbye. And all the rest I never go. Goodbye, my party, goodbye. Goodbye, my party. Goodbye, my party. Goodbye, my party. Goodbye, my party, goodbye. I'm so often with the party lash. Goodbye, my party, goodbye. Well, the bosses lay on with demands for cash. Goodbye, my party, goodbye. To do what else I need with rash. Goodbye, my party, goodbye. I have to take it or lose my hash. Goodbye, my party, goodbye. Goodbye, my party. Goodbye, my party. Goodbye, my party. Goodbye, my party, goodbye.
Among other things, the populace demanded coinage of silver, control of the railroads, a graduated income tax, and a reclamation of government lands held in excess of their actual needs. It was a program designed to redistribute income, wealth, and power in favor of the oppressed lower classes and farmers.
The Des Moines group returned elated from the convention. They were filled with optimism as they worked tirelessly for the populist candidate, General James B. Weaver. They had the platform that would speak for most of the voters, so naturally they felt that victory was within their grasp.
The elections of 1894 proved to be a dismal disappointment. The Southern Alliance had taken control of the already established Democratic Party, and even the Republicans had a silver coinage plank in their platform. It seemed to Gaston and his friends that the current political system would take too long to change for them to be effective. They had to find another way to achieve the reform they so passionately wanted.
They were interested in the numerous demonstration colonies around the country based on Thoreau's Walden Pond idea. These groups almost always began with the heat of idealistic fervor, which invariably cooled in the face of the harsh realities of frontier life, degenerated into personal acrimony and failure. Gaston saw one fatal flaw in all of these experiments. They all depended completely on the total cooperation of every member, yet had no provision for rewarding individual effort or initiative.
The disappointing elections of 1894 made Gaston reconsider his idea of a colony that would demonstrate to the world a solution to the problems of our monopoly-dominated capitalism. He was sure that socialism was not the answer. Its basic tenet, from each according to his ability and to each according to his need, wasn't workable. It was impossible to measure a worker's ability, much less his need.
So Gaston turned to the theories of the brilliant Henry George, whose masterpiece, Progress and Poverty, had sold millions of copies across the country and around the world. George found the solution to the country's problems in the tendency of landowners to hold that land out of use while waiting for the price to rise. Since George reasoned that all wealth comes from land, the community is poorer for every acre that's held out of use. His system would tax land, not according to its market value at the time, but according to its worth if it were used efficiently. This would tax land into maximum productivity and make land available to anyone who would pay to use it.
Henry George reasoned that since real estate value is the only value created by the concentration of people in a community, this is the only value the community should tax. Any income produced by a landowner through his own effort or investment should remain his own.
This Gaston felt was the key. He combined the pure single tax concepts of George along with some anti-monopolistic planks from the populist platform and arrived at what he called cooperative individualism. While the community would encourage and even expect cooperation from its members, each individual was entitled to any profit he created. And on January 4th, 1894, the Des Moines Investigating Club heard Ernest Gaston's new theory along with a plan for a community unlike any attempted before.
To one who has the true spirit of a reformer, the present conditions are unbearable. The reformer must face the alternative of being true to his higher convictions or turning his back on what he knows to be his true self, pursue the prize of material gain.
There is but one way to escape this dire alternative. What more practical, more reasonable, than for those who understand the devices by which the labor of the many is taken for the profit of the few, to unite for the elimination of the land speculator, the usurer, the monopolist of public service, and all other parasites who fatten upon industry, compelling the producer to gnaw the bone while they eat meat. Believing not only in the wisdom and practicality of such an effort, but that it offers the only hope of escape from the deplorable conditions everywhere. The plans herein presented formulate a model community to be free from all forms of private monopoly, and which will assure to its members equality of opportunity, full reward for individual efforts, and the benefits of cooperation in matters of general concern.
We have not been swept away by the dreams of an ideal society from which selfishness has been banished and men sought only the happiness and good of others. We have sought to build for humanity as it is, not the worst, not the best, but plain, everyday, average humanity seeking its own interest.
We here present the chief features of an association under whose rules we feel confident can be secured advantages which cannot be hoped for outside of it. A community wherein he who labors will reap the fruits of his labor, no less, no more. Where no robber barons armed with special warrants under the law will bar access to the bounties of nature. Where there will neither be the isolation of the farm, nor the crowding of the cities. Where men, always including women, will be the rulers, and wealth the servant. A community, in short, where intelligent men and women, drawn together by a common purpose, will seek to make practical applications of the best thoughts, of the best minds of all ages, to a solution of the problems which threaten today the existence of every nation on the globe. In such an effort, we invite the cooperation of all of kindred aims.
In such an effort, we invite the cooperation of all of kindred aims. Gaston issued this invitation to an enthusiastic audience. After a pause, Al Booster, full of Midwestern reservations, said,
I believe it has a fair hope of success.
a fair hope of success sounded good. The project now had a name. Immediately, a constitution was drawn up, plans were made, recruits were sought, and a location committee headed by James Belangi was sent to scout out potential sites. Tennessee, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. Wherever land was plentiful and cheap. Finally, they visited the home of a staunch single taxer, Edward Quincy Norton of Daphne. They stayed on the eastern shore for several days, and Belangi wrote to Gaston describing the area.
We viewed the land and country over the hills and along the shore, high banks and sandy beach, with every here and there a spring gushing out of its bank. The view from the shore is magnificent. Looking across the bay, about 8 or 10 miles, Mobile in full view. And away between it and the Gulf lies a long stretch of the western shore of the bay. The bay is quite placid at evening tide, and the lack of litter and seaweed and the gently sloping beach make it a lovely place to bathe. Land back away from the bay can be bought for 50 cents to $1 per acre. It is covered with timber and is for no account for farming purpose except as it is fertilized. But it lies high and is nearly level. There are fine streams for water power, and with proper labor can be made very attractive and profitable. I believe it is the healthiest region we have struck yet. If we could secure a mile frontage of the bay and a good body of land running back to the tablelands, we would be nicely fixed. To my mind, the only drawback is the absence of a railroad on that side of the bay. To ship our products north, it would be necessary to go 25 miles by land to railroad or by boat to Mobile. We would be somewhat handicapped. I would not, however, want to live on the Mobile side near the city.
Some things never change.
James Belangi wrote his letter in July, and by the middle of August, a group of excited Iowans were preparing for the far-off move to the eastern shore of the Mobile Bay. On November the 15th, 1894, they arrived on the wharf down at Old Battle's Landing.
28 people, farmers, merchants, barbers, journalists, their wives, and 9 children clambered eagerly ashore to view what must have seemed to be a battlefield. Along the shore were the same oaks, magnolias, and pines we see today, but just a short distance inland, the entire county had been clear-cut for timber. Tree stumps and scrub growth as far as the eye could see.
If you'll notice, not many of the trees, except for a few giant oaks, are much over 50 or 60 years old. The fabled virgin pine and giant cypress and poplar have all been stripped from the primeval forest to build cities and ships around the world.
The land was barren and sandy. It was being used by Mr. Solomon Stapleton as a kind of scrub cow pasture. In fact, it was land that no one really wanted. It was of no value or wealth. What more perfect place to try out Mr. George's theory? Take this land that has no value and create value by the concentration of people in a community.
By January of '95, they were the proud owners of Stapleton's pasture and about 130 acres of sub-marginal scrub lands around it, and were closing the deal on another 200 acres to the east. Oh, it's true, they had no houses, no roads, no water, no power, but they still had a treasury with a grand total of $178.38. No odds maker on earth would have given them a snowball's chance of survival, much less success.
So what did they do? They rolled up their sleeves and got to work. This little group, who for the most part had been strangers to one another just a few weeks before, pulled together and worked like Trojans. First, they laid out our beautiful parks, making the beachfront and most beautiful spots the common property of all. Then they began pulling stumps, clearing lots, erecting houses, and laying out our roads.
Scratching out Bancroft, Morphy, and Fells.
They scratched, and they dug, and they built. And then they did what they did the best. They talked. Almost immediately, they started the forums the Sunday afternoon forums on the bluff, where they talked about single tax, reform, single tax, road building, single tax, Buddhism, breakwaters, and single tax. Almost anything that interested the group as a whole or the individuals personally. Then they wrote about what they had said. Immediately, pamphlets, letters to the editors, letters home, poured out of Fairhope. And even before there was a town here, these writings created interest and aroused curiosity around the country.
Almost miraculously, Fairhope began to take shape. While interest was growing among reformers and intellectuals around the world, a well was dug. Roads were laid out, buildings were erected, and the amazing half-mile-long Fairhope Pier was built.
The community of Fairhope was open for business. A thriving little waterfront, enchanted rustic beaches where songbirds competed with the lapping waves for the ear's attention, and the most beautiful sunsets in all the world lured tourists from everywhere. The idea of free land brought in young families looking for a place to start. And the writings of these intellectual talkers attracted artists and thinkers from around the world who came as visitors, fell in love with the place, and became Fairhopers, just as true as the founders.
One of the new Fairhopers was Marie Howland. She was a well-known reformer since the 1850s, when she was associated with the likes of Walt Whitman and the scandalous 555 Broadway Club in New York City. She arrived in the colony's 4th year and brought with her a real appreciation of Gaston's cooperative individualism, along with a shipment of books weighing over 1,100 pounds. Marie Howland created the Fairhope Library before there was a library in Mobile. And luckily for us, she began writing for the Fairhope Courier, which preserved her words in its issues.
Her words still live in Fairhope just as surely as her ideas and her spirit still inhabit her library and the streets where she walked.
There is more here than meets the eye.
January the 1st, 1900.
Our Daphne friends, who often drive down to visit us, say they deplore in their larger town the lack of social advantages we have here in Fairhope. You see, they are scattered and are not bound by a common economic theory like our single tax philosophy. We all live within a quarter mile of each other, yet most of us feel secluded enough. This cottage, ensconced as it is in pines, looks out on the lights of 12 other houses each night. As my charming Tennessee friend says, I have seclusion without solitude.
October the 15th, 1899.
You may say that you could not live in such a far-away and lifeless place. Now, what an absurd idea. Why, it is all life here. curses upon us. As for your city excitements, what are they compared to ours? What are your operas and corporation fights compared to the excitement of going over one's domain each morning and noting the changes in a single night? Here, seeds have sprung up. A brood of pretty chicks have hatched. A glorious rose has opened its flower. A mockingbird sings in your tree. Why, it is all in yourself, my friend. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Of course, viewed from your artificial standard, we may all seem a little dead.
It would be impossible to discuss this magic essence of Fairhope without including Marietta Johnson. Her revolutionary approach to education began with a simple realization that children are not merely miniature adults. They have different psychological and physical needs, and meeting those needs, along with providing positive educational experience, would allow the entire organism to grow simultaneously. The result of that kind of education would be citizens exactly like the colony wanted to attract: bright, industrious people with an abiding sense of fairness. This very campus was the well-known test tube in the educational experiment of organic education. Those of us who were lucky enough to have attended here will always regard this spot as the origin of some of our finest qualities, and we will be forever grateful that it was here that Marietta Johnson chose to work her gentle magic of organic education. She speaks to us now from the pages of her book, 30 Years with an Idea.
It is one thing to have an educational theory. It is something quite different to put it into practice. The town of Fairhope is an effort to make a good theory work. So this is an eminently appropriate location for a school working out a good theory. The town of Fairhope is conducted on the theory that community values belong to the community, and the values created by the individual belong to the individual. The aim of the school is to study to know and meet the needs of the growing organism. That is to conduct a school program which will preserve the sincerity and unself-consciousness of the emotional life, to provide for the finest, keenest intellectual activity, and minister to the all-round development of the nervous system. Ministering to growth and meeting the needs of the growing organism is the sole function of the educational process. Hence, the term organic. The child is a reaching organism, and the test of the environment is his reaction to it. A bad child cannot come from a good home. However good the home is, it is not good for him, or he would be good. Parents and teachers often protest that they treat children all alike, thinking this is impartial. The only way to be truly impartial is to get the right reaction. We must constantly bear in mind that we are dealing with one individual, single organism. It is impossible to have good health in one part of the organism and ill health in another. It is either good or bad for the entire organism. Always.
Her school became world famous and attracted educators and students from many countries. It was a real asset to a growing Fairhope.
Of course, in Fairhope, there has always been conflict. Conflict and financial progress go hand in hand. And any community that encourages diverse opinions and then encourages talking about them can expect plenty of conflict. Fairhope was home to three main groups: the single taxers, non-member residents of colony land, and the townspeople who came to Fairhope and bought land outside of the colony.
This was a volatile mix. In 1905, an article appeared in the Mobile Item which complained bitterly about the governing of the colony and was signed only a colony trustee. Mr. George Warren Wood, acting secretary at a colony meeting, leaves us this account.
A special meeting of the corporation was called by petition on the evening of February 27th. After the business named in the petition was transacted, C.K. Wood quickly moved to adjourn. I could tell by the look on his face he was trying to stave off something he dreaded. Mrs. Marie Howland rose on a point of privilege, and his son, Frank L. Brown, who was president, ruled that it had precedent over the motion to adjourn. I was inclined to appeal his decision, but my attention had not been called to that point of order, and I wasn't sure. An article had appeared in the Mobile Item which excited indignation. C.K. Brown's daughter, Mrs. Richard A. Hale, was believed to have written it. She and Miss Howland are trustees. Mrs. Howland's point was this: an article reflecting injuriously on Fairhope had appeared in the item and was said to have been written by a trustee. As she was a trustee, she felt this put her under a cloud. She wanted it known that she did not write it and did not approve of it. Well, other speakers followed her, most of them denouncing the article. Dr. Richard A. Hale said he didn't know who wrote the article, but that it was all right. It told the truth. James Belanger spoke out in opposition. He didn't accuse Miss Hale of writing the article, but he denounced it unsparingly. Suddenly, Dr. Hale sprung upon him, clutching him by the throat, threw him down. Those nearest Dr. Hale seized him. They didn't hurt him, but he was helpless in their grasp. They held him until his anger cooled, and he didn't try any further violence at that time. The next morning, he met Mr. Belanger on Fairhope Avenue and exclaimed, "Do you think you can stand up in a meeting and vilify my wife with impunity?" And struck him on the head with a bag of coin in his hand. The first blow knocked off his hat and lit on his shoulder. He struck him again on the head and drew blood from the scalp. Then threw him down, clutching him by the throat, tried to strangle him, exclaiming, "I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" For these assaults, Dr. Hale was tried in circuit court, convicted, and fined 1 cent.
The circuit judge must have been in the anti-single tax camp. The pamphlet Real Fairhope Folks, compiled in the 1920s by Eleanor Risley, provides a priceless glimpse into the essence of Fairhope life. Here, a crusty veteran of the Ruskin, Florida experiment describes a meeting of the Fairhope Sunday Forum.
Now I want you to rub in that liniment I made you real good. I don't care if it smells like rotten eggs and gasoline, it'll do you good. I just got back from the forum. It wasn't much, really. A smiley, white-haired man presided and put 'em all in good humor to once and laughed. That little International Workers of the World man was the peacefullest critter there. Most of the men there was peeved that they couldn't get into IWW without working for somebody else. They said it wasn't an open organization. But one man got up and said it was all right. The Masons was a closed organization, and so was the church. I see that right away. You gotta know how to ride a goat to get in with the Masons. And everybody knows it takes a saved soul and a clean collar to stay in the church. Well, at the very last, an awful, straight, solemn man, he strolled into the arena. The woman that sat next to me said he was the high priest of Fairhope. I never saw no high priest no place. He sure did look like one. He stood up mighty solemn, and he said they was two things if you didn't have, you was bad off. They was free speech and free land, and Fairhope had them both, and we all clapped like mad. As I was walking out, I asked a man why everybody argued so peppery, and yet we didn't need no permanent chairman like we had down in Ruskin with a sawed-off shotgun. He says, well, you see, we're all single taxes at heart. We only argue because some of us believe the single tax road just runs off to the next big town, where we'll all have to branch off at the crossroads. And some of us believe it runs clear around the world. I see, says I, but I didn't. Which way did the high priest that spoke last believe? Him? He says. I ain't sure, but I think he believes it runs plumb from hell to breakfast. Oh. Well, I reckon I about told it all. I'll be going now. You rub in that liniment good now, you hear?
Another glimpse into the essence of Fairhope life comes through in this sketch of a woman known only as Madame, Fairhope's veterinarian. The author was standing on the corner of Fairhope Avenue and Section Street in front of Mershon's drugstore, what is now Fairhope Pharmacy.
One day last winter, as I stood idly by lighting my pipe at the drugstore corner, I heard, up in Wheeler's Hall, a group of musicians attempting vainly to tune up. I drifted over and they were working on Listen to the Mockingbird. The group seemed to recognize no distinctive leader, and they sort of drifted one after another toward the mockingbird. He proved to be a shy and elusive bird indeed. So I leaned against the window and waited. Somehow I had faith that that piano player was going to put salt on that bird's tail sooner or later, and the rest of the group would catch up with him. Below the window, a jaunty figure wearing riding clothes and a long French cape was dismounting a horse. It was Madame, Fairhope's veterinary. She ran lightly up the steps of Wheeler's Hall and opened the door. That mockingbird had fluttered high into the blue and refused to either sing or come down. Madame stepped to the piano and the bird fluttered its wings. She opened her lips and we heard its first faint, clear note. There he was. We all saw him as he perched in a red yew palm tree and sang his heart out to his mate perched high in a glistening pine.
Listen to the mockingbird, listen to the mockingbird, the mockingbird's just singing over free. Listen to the mockingbird, listen to the mockingbird, still singing over the spring.
Now there's nothing in the darkening room but the voice of Madame and the sobbing cello. Then we heard across the waters the Italian sailors chant their prayers to Santa Lucia. to the rocks of the Rhine, where the Lorelei beckons to death. Then we watched the inimitable coquetry of La Paloma, its rhythmic accompaniment as sad and as inevitable as death. Then the pianist struck a heavy chord. Madame stepped a little forward, and it rings out up in Wheeler's Hall, the song that has stirred more hearts to liberty than any song in all the world, the immortal Marseillaise. With the wave of her hand, she was gone as quickly as she came, and there was but plain daylight up in Wheeler's Hall once more. I lighted my pipe and went down to walk by the bay. Madame rode on before me. She was on her way to battles. It isn't every town that can boast of a veterinary like Fairhope's, one who can, with such careless abandon, sing in 5 languages and bring 5 nations before your eyes, while she waits up in Wheeler's Hall for a Fairhope druggist to prepare medicine for a sick cow.
From the beginning, Fairhope and Fairhopers were a source of amusement for their more traditional southern neighbors. A Fairhope poet turned this around and poked fun at the local fundamentalist religious groups in the poem Dinner on the Grounds. Dr. Cliff Rhymes added the music.
Seconds and thirds. He smoked up living water and ran out of town. But all the congregation heard was dinner on the ground. Dinner on the ground. Dinner on the ground. I'm just contenting for the children and plenty for the ham. Dinner on the ground. Dinner on the ground. Chicken pie, ham and cake for dinner on the ground.
like folks from out of town. A boiling coffee from without, people caught a whiff. They only turned away their heads to get another sniff. Amen, I'm through, go eat. Yell that and elder down. The doxology will be just dinner on the ground. Dinner on the ground. Dinner on the ground. I'm hungry. Come and get it. Dinner on the ground. Music and pie and cake for dinner on the ground. We shall come rejoicing. Dinner on the ground. Let's eat.
The 1920s, a time of cultural and economic growth. The colony had incorporated and become known as the Fairhope Single Tax Corporation. Its policy of free land made it quickly grow into the largest community on the Eastern Shore, and the elusive quality we know as the essence of Fairhope was flourishing.
From the very beginning, the colonists had such keen curiosities and diverse interests that clubs, societies, and forums sprang up like weeds. By the turn of the century, there were a score of them, including the School of Philosophy, a Women's Suffrage Association, a Dramatics Club, an Academy of Arts and Sciences, and a band.
The mainstay of the town were working people of modest means who appreciated the town's uniqueness and committed themselves to making Fairhope a better place to live.
Fairhope of the 20s enjoyed its artists, and they enriched the town.
Financial good times at the Single Tax Corporation began to fade in 1927 with the completion of the Cochrane Bridge and Causeway. The Fairhope Pier was its main source of income, producing nearly $7,000 at its peak in 1925. By 29, the total receipts were $46. The Fairhope Pier was no longer financially viable.
As state taxes on colony land skyrocketed and the income from the pier plunged to zero, hard times fell upon the Single Tax Corporation. The Great Depression had racked the country and outside donations dried up. In the early 30s, they turned over ownership of the parks and the pier to the city of Fairhope, with the understanding that there would forever remain public property.
The 30s were a time of important funerals, as the people who gave life to the colony reached the end of their days.
Howland, Belangi, and Brown lie beneath the pines.
Johnson, Gaston, and Wood remain forever by the Big Head Wash.
But the spark they gave this town lived on and lives today.
There's more here than meets the eye.
The 1940s brought another world war, and Fairhope boys like Barney Gaston answered their country's call. He was killed when he dived his fighter plane into a column of Nazi tanks to save a French village. And he and other kids from the Eastern Shore, like young soldiers from all wars, gave more than could be asked of them.
But back home, the war ushered in a new era of prosperity. Thousands of workers came to the area to help build America's mighty war machine. So many came to Fairhope that in 1944, the Single Tax Colony leased its last available lands.
The new residents were attracted by Fairhope's geography and its hospitality. They knew nothing of Henry George or his teachings. But simply by living on colony property, they were participants in a noble experiment to save mankind. The success of that experiment lent special meaning to their lives.
They were the first shockwave of the baby boom. The new Fairhopers enjoyed the casual, open atmosphere.
After the war, young men and women returned to Fairhope to jostle with the newcomers for elbow room. The baby boom was on in earnest, and new schools were filled up just as fast as they could be built. One thing that these children of the baby boom all had in common was that when they grew up and moved away, there was always something haunting them.
There's more here than meets meets the eye.
It was Fairhope. No matter where they landed, Carmel, New York City, there was always something missing.
Fairhope, the place that nurtured imagination in its young, as it treasured the artists and odd characters who peopled its streets.
Like Gretchen Ridge, with her paper sack full of puppet heads and play scripts that Fairhopers young and old would turn to magic on the stage.
Or Stuart the Hermit just walked in barefooted from Parker Road, snake-killing garden hoe in hand.
Or the gentle artist Anna Braun, walking her dog.
Or the painter Marian Acker, faded jeans and sandals, her hair in unthinkable pigtails.
Or the dancer Winifred Duncan, pushing her English baby carriage filled with cats. Groceries from the city market. And a medicinal jug from the green front.
Or Craig and Butch Sheldon, whizzing past regular parents, perched on their shiny blue Harley Davidson.
Look out! Here comes old Marmaduke Dyson in a sunburned Studebaker. He built most of this town, and he doesn't stop for red lights.
Fairhope has always revered her characters, and they have enriched this town with a legacy from the early days.
Kids were growing up in paradise. Fairhope was a park. They had the quiet neighborhoods, the beaches, and the mysterious movie-set fantasy worlds, the gullies. Fairhope's author, poet, and outdoorsman Walker D. Wallace discusses the gullies from a parent's point of view.
Most people look upon a gully as an ugly gash in the earth. But to the children of Fairhope who flock to our gully, it is an adventurous wonderland, a western badland, an African jungle filled with all sorts of wild creatures. In it are caves where gnomes and elves frolic, and Tarzan swing on grapevine wreaths to treetop houses. Toddlers build sand houses near imaginary seas, while others whiz down pine straw banks on cardboard sleds. Frogs and wandering lizards are captured and exhibited as creatures from a lost world. It is a land where toys are forgotten in favor of the wondrous playthings provided by nature. Bird nests are a source of reverent wonder, and when tiny beaks peck through their shells, delighted squeals herald their arrival. The gully is a boon to tired mothers. No clutter or clatter in the house, and even lunch is served here. Caveman style. The call of the gully is the call of the wild, appealing to the most primitive curiosity in every child. Here, inquisitive minds find answers. On weekends and after school, the mad rush to the gully begins. Only darkness drives them home. After all, what are the amusements of the drawing room or TV den in comparison?
The gullies were kingdoms of the imagination, and Fairhope was a place of safety where children saw artists sitting alongside accountants at the PTA or the round table meetings. The message was clear. A Fairhope kid could be anything he wanted to be. A lawyer or a philosopher, an actor or a banker, or any combination they chose. It was all the same in Fairhope.
There was more here than met the eye.
The artists and intellectuals of Fairhope didn't breathe the rarefied air of a Greenwich Village bistro or a college campus where everyone they encountered was a fellow traveler on the road to enlightenment. On the contrary, most Fairhopers were hard workers who accepted the artists for what they did. This allowed our artists to concentrate on their craft and to view their own artistic genius with the same realistic humor they would any other benign mental illness, and to delight in discovering, like Fairhope children exploring a new gully.
such a delighted, bewildered child is Craig Sheldon. Not only did he carve all sorts of strange and wonderful things out of all kinds of wood, he wrote a column in the Fairhope papers starting way back in 1947. He named his column after the place where he stood to get his inspiration to write. And all up and down the eastern shore, people eagerly read, "Knee-deep in Fly Creek."
It's Armavette out there, too. Now, you've been taking the Shaggy by James Hill, Cross Creek by Margaret Ian Ross, dragged along the eastern shore by Harwood. But you've never really been in the swim till you've been mired up in Fly Creek by Sheldon.
But Sheldon couldn't possibly write so imposing a thing as a newspaper column without some serious help and counsel. Divine Providence provided that help in the form of an ornery, talking bullfrog named Godfrey.
I met old Godfrey while I was standing in the creek waiting for inspiration. I heard this awful choking, painful buzzing noise coming from the creek bank. I found this very old, very large bullfrog trying to spit up a live hornet that was angrily protesting being swallowed alive. Thinking fast, I lit up a cigarette and gave him a few puffs.
Thanks, pal.
We struck up a conversation, and he became a large help to me in this great community service. Now, Godfrey's no ordinary talking bullfrog. He was hatched out during the Earth's first millennium in a place that is now under the polar ice cap. Since then, he's been baked, fried, swallowed, dehydrated, and drowned, only to be revived in a world completely in the control of man. To put it mildly, he doesn't like us. Most of his remarks, couched in sarcastic meanings, directed at everything we do. I seldom give him an argument, largely because I just don't have one.
Godfrey is a militant environmentalist who has urged Sheldon to take on all kinds of powerful enemies like the oyster shell dredge, Ciba-Geigy, the Guza, anybody that Godfrey saw endangering his fellow gophers, frogs, and alligators, what he calls the GFA. Godfrey's place on the political spectrum is far right. Far right. Far to the right of Genghis Khan, the only human he actually likes.
I'll never forget old King Nugent. You probably remember him as Genghis Khan. He had his province so filled with the fear of the law that a virgin with a sack of gold could ride the entire length of his empire, unmolested. Can you say that for your great traveling United States?
Well, no, I guess not.
And don't think you will. Put the criminal out of business and the judge and lawyer go out of business with them. And this makes them both sick. Don't you wish you were a fraud?
Oh, shut up.
Got it?
Godfrey regarded us all with the same disdain. You see, to him, humanity itself is the problem.
Good Lord, old timer, you sucked that one down in record time.
I say we all blow the thing to smithereens.
Why, you're loaded. We can't go around blowing up dredges and endangering human life. We got laws.
No, you humanoids ain't heated the big natural clocks that Shepherd and Club matter. Your puny little man-made laws are for puny little men. The gophers and frogs and alligators, the GFA, obey a higher law. I hope and pray for the day when your ridiculous clothespin tumble from the line and there's room for decent bird life.
Godfrey didn't care if you were the next door neighbor or the chief of police. If you irritated, threatened, or even crossed Godfrey's path, he was liable to go into a tirade, which poor Sheldon was obligated to put in the paper that week. As you can imagine, that frog kept poor Sheldon in Dutch with a lot of people around here, and sooner or later was bound to lead to legal problems. What actually happened when Sheldon was dragged into court was recorded on the pages of the Wall Street Journal. We have fictionalized the actual turning point of this trial good-naturedly in hopes of avoiding hurting anybody's feelings or getting ourselves into legal problems.
Mr. Sheldon, it all comes down to one simple thing. Either you slandered my client or someone else did. Now, you say the slanderous remarks in your column were not made by you, but by someone or something named Godfrey.
A species rhino, a 10-inch bullfrog.
And this frog can talk.
I'll say, he gives me the devil all the time, and believe you me, it ain't easy being called an idiot by a bullfrog.
Well, then you must produce this frog and have him take the blame. Or we must conclude that you are indeed guilty of slander. Well, we're waiting.
Let me ask you something, Mr. Lawyer. Are you a religious man?
As a matter of fact, I am.
So you believe in God?
Why, certainly.
Well, I'll make a deal with you. You show me God, and I'll show you my talking bullfrog.
Fairhope was visited in 1979 by the famous critic Calvin Trillin, who wrote an article in no less a publication than the New Yorker. He said that as far as he could see, Fairhope was no different than any other ordinary southern town.
There was more here than met his eye.
He had not walked with the night winds down these streets alone.
He had not stood with mind's eye open in the pasture of Solomon Stapleton.
Or seen the Yankee storekeeper, soiled sleeves roll, chains stretched between mule and stone.
Pull, you ugly devil! Snatch it out by the root! Pull for Henry George!
Echoing in the alleyways and empty lots.
Loudest in the back lots and alleys.
Louder still in the Clifftop Park where the Sunday forums rang with voices.
In such an effort, we invite the cooperation of all of kindred aims.
The echoes are still here.
The
Echoes.
Still.
Here.
In the tall pines on the knoll where Belangi died an old man clearing brush for his town.
The night wind carries echoes through the widened streets where the first ones lived.
Raising lettuce, wild,
And children noisily.
Making ends meet.
Making it work.
Silence now. Only the sound of the wind as it rustles the residential leaves near the houses that claim the gully to the big head.
all is silent with the wind, the houses hushed in sleep.
We are lifted by the night winds to the breathless tops of the tall pines. We hear the Fairhope words of artist Cleveland Woodward as we prepare to plunge to the founder's place of rest.
The soul alone with vision clear, among the flowers silent moves, and marble walls detain it not. It moves beside these walls, along this river's bank, beneath These trees from whom in plan and shape all trees on earth were fashioned. No limiting boundary to this moving soul, no height, no depth too great, nor time, nor space can limit its advance. It penetrates the light of heaven and moves among the rocks of hell.
Peace thou upon thy mortal plain. I have not gone away. Look thou within thy inmost heart, I there abide to stay. In silence keep thy vigil bright. Attune thy ear to my soft voice. I stand among the witnesses. Closest to you I stand. In silent hours through the night I whisper softly in your ear. Canst thou not hear my quiet voice, O dull and reasoning mortal ear? Canst thou not see me, O my dear, here on this bank, beneath this pine? I am more real than thou, far more of dull and reasoning mortal mind.
The night wind plunges, swirling among the ghostly pines, moves, unseen, with vision clear, among the stones of those long dead.
What soft voices would we hear?
If, as the poet said, we attuned our ear
To those who labored in the birthing of this town,
would we hear delighted children's laughter tinkling by Marietta's grave?
would we hear scolding words from feisty Howland's tomb?
The moon is gone, and darkest dark of night cloaks us in a hush.
Is that a distant blacksmith heard clanging near old Joe Keller's peaceful spot?
The stone of Jeremiah D. Lucier. Single tax is justice. His voice is not so soft.
And clear-eyed Clement Coleman, laying between his wife and old George Wood, her father, the two he cared for in life, guard him for eternity.
More recent grave for Verna Horn, gifted giving teacher. Beneath the pine she taught so many to love. What lessons would she have tonight?
They are all around us. Rashans, Bertlands, Dysons, Tuvesons, brought here to rest in Fairhope.
The woodmen of the world put up a stone for the venerable James Belanger. Graffiti scratched in dark lichens, Mr. Single Tax. If we attuned our eye, would we see the old man smile at this?
The night has lost its hold on the ghostly pines. A change is in the darkness.
At the simple citizen stone of Gaston, we pause to listen.
The last cold shiver of night shivers the spine as the sky begins to lighten.
Here among these bones we have stood in search of something rightfully ours.
Something freely given by the dead around us.
Something more than meets the eye.
The cold silver sky lights the road to Stimson's mill.
And from the shadows, simple Fairhope houses start to show themselves. Proudly show no spinnerets nor gingerbread, no costly piece of trim.
Why show off money you ain't got?
Fairhope philosophy in every board.
We move unseen and gathering light to the simple campus where Marietta Johnson gave her gifts and Fairhope minds were formed.
And as the new year dawns, we feel the presence of this great structure. Fairhope were built to pay homage to the past and contemplate the now.
For honest souls to search for truth.
Which gathers us tonight.
What truths have been unearthed? What essence have we found?
Sweetness born of noblest human want.
Desire to help his fellow man.
A beauty born of creativity through Fairhope's art and exploring children.
A delight in discovery born of openness.
How could it be dead when so many gather in this search?
Fairhopers all ready to claim their birthright.
More is here than meets the eye.
As the new ones move in, let them strengthen that essence, not dilute it. Let them know, as we were made to know, that Fairhope is a way of life, not just a place to live.
It is a gift passed from founders and all Fairhopers since.
Participate.
Create.
Appreciate.
To own the essence of Fairhope, one merely has to live it.
It's been said that life begins in Fairhope.
What better place to put meaning into life than the town created to elevate all mankind?
What better time than now to be apart?
What better time than now to reach out each to each and take the hands of Fairhopers beside you?
Reach out and take their hands, yes, and hold them up for all the world to see.
And do what Fairhope groups have always done since the Pilchers wrote the song.
No evening can complete itself without that song. The words are on the back of your program. That corny, sweet old song of Fairhope. Past clear and cold.
The first fierce sun of the new year pierces the distant treetops.
The gleaming white tower of the Fairhope Baptist is first to catch the warming gold.
The future has begun.
A new day clatters with restaurant help and jogs with early risers.
Humdrum doings begin to be done in this far from humdrum place.
Where more is here than meets the eye.
More
Is
Here.
Then
Meets
the
Eye.